My goodness, we're only about 24 slokas away from completing the Bhagavad Gita reading that we started almost 1 year ago. Like that. What to do? Continue.
Who was it that did the yoga? She started 3 years.
Yeah, that's Swami Chinmayananda. You just start over. You just continue. Keep on keeping on. Okay. Gita Dhyanam. Om. O Bhagavad Gita, by which Arjuna was illumined by Lord Krishna himself, and which was composed of 18 chapters from within the Mahabharata by the ancient sage Vyasa. O Divine Mother, destroyer of rebirth, who showers the nectar of oneness upon us, O Bhagavad Gita, my affectionate mother, on thee I meditate. All the Upanishads are the cows, the milker is the cowherd boy, Krishna, Arjuna is the calf, people of purified intellect are the drinkers, and the milk is the supreme nectar of the Gita. My salutations to the Lord, who is the source of the supreme bliss, whose grace makes the mute eloquent and the crippled cross mountains. Hari Om Tat Sat. Okay. We're at 1852. And since we took a morning break, we'll read the last two slokas just to center, come back to this place. Learn from me in brief, O Arjuna, how he who has attained perfection reaches Brahman, that supreme state of knowledge. So these three slokas relate. This one we had covered last, number 51. Endowed with a pure intellect, controlling the self by firmness, relinquishing sound and other objects, and abandoning attraction and hatred. So abandoning, remember that's ragadvesha. So sometimes it's called love, hate, sometimes attraction and repulsion, and like that. So pure intellect, sometimes the example of Sherlock Holmes comes to mind as an example of this. Of course, Sherlock Holmes was a character that lives in books and movies and like this. But the idea of Sherlock Holmes is, it helps us with visualizing this pure intellect and what the pure intellect means. It doesn't mean dull intellect by any means, and it doesn't mean an intellect that's beholden to a particular notion or idea. And with the story of Sherlock Holmes, he was asked because he solved every single case, never failed. And so he was asked, how did you do this? How is it that you solve every case? And he would say something like, it's simple, dear Watson. And then, what's the formula? He says, you investigate every possible lead, no matter, and he says, and you see if it's true or not. And you dismiss everything that's untrue, that's not true. And he said, what remains is the truth, no matter how improbable. So no matter how much we felt something couldn't have been the case or is the case, with the pure intellect, we have the capacity to investigate every single one without being beholden to our preconceived notions and ideas of what it is. Which is a very interesting approach. And so we can say that's pure intellect. Because this intellect has become impure only through affiliation with the ego notion. The issue is things seem a certain way, but they're not. It seems like we're separate, but we're not. And it's not incredibly hard, and the more pure the intellect is, that is, the less beholden the intellect is to the feeling of being separate, the less beholden it is for it to investigate really, truly, to see our origins. It's possible to see, absolutely not, we're not separate. Huh? I'm not acting. I'm not doing it. It's all universal stuff. And I don't understand, this is intellect speaking, I don't understand exactly how all of this works, but I'm very clear on I'm not doing it. And I'm very clear on there being a universal factor and a universal set of laws which are governing the action. So this is the idea of the pure intellect, is being able to work it out regardless of how it feels, regardless of how it seems. Controlling oneself by firmness, which is required in order to have the pure intellect. And we were talking the other day. I was talking with Dharmajan yesterday. And beautiful. He says when things within him, tendencies, when they don't serve any longer, he'll drop them. Now, Peace Pilgrim, he's very motivated by Peace Pilgrim and inspired by Peace Pilgrim, because Peace Pilgrim would say that as soon as she sees that something doesn't serve, she drops it immediately. And there's so much in this psyche that's not serving because it's beholden to the notion of separation. And it's not leading us, therefore, to peace, not real peace inside, inner peace. And how to let go, well, it does require control. It requires an inner environment where we're able to see it, what's not serving, right? And then to have the capacity to choose how to deal with it, to take that resolve, and then be absolutely firm in it. And of course, the more firm we are, the quicker it's gone.
What are the, metrics for what isn't serving? Like, how can you tell when something's not serving?
Does it lead to inner peace or not? That's Peace Pilgrim, and it's the best approach. Does it lead to lasting inner peace or not? You see, the issue that we have is when we understand the psyche more, we see that whenever we avoid something and don't deal with it, no inner peace from it. Because it remains, it's like we bottle it up in the psyche, it becomes a knot, and it comes out at the most inconvenient times. And then it, masquerades, it's anger and all this stuff that we see, because we bottled up all this stuff. We didn't know how to deal with it. And of course, ultimately, the way to deal with it is renunciation, which is just, I represent for love. This is just an idea of it. Let's just say, I represent for love. And there will be no limitations to this love whatsoever. There will be no limitations to this love. I will not allow anything to stand in the way of this love. And the only thing that could possibly stand in the way of it are limited ideas and notions. And those limited ideas and notions would be seen to not serve. Right? From that perspective, with that resolve, they would be seen to not serve. And therefore, I cannot hold them any longer. I must let you go. I loved you one day. There was a time when I really loved you and I appreciated you, but now you don't serve. And God bless you. Speaking to the ideas and notions and all that inside, no. It doesn't serve. It doesn't do. We're pure. We're pure. We see the purity and we wish to embody this purity, and we see the potential for peace and we wish to embody the real peace, and there can't be anything that stands in the way of it. It doesn't serve. And of course, he's not saying you stop doing things and all of that. He's speaking of the real renunciation, which is, I'm going to renounce the self-centered actions that aren't beneficial, period. And that's the samnyasa. And I'm going to renounce the expectation of fruit, no matter how subtle. Even if it's just a feeling that arises, that it feels so good when someone says, what a beautiful job I did, I'm going to renounce that too. And I'm just going to do it because it's the right thing to do. And by the way, I recognize that if I can get there, when I can get there, this inner environment is pure. And peace. And that actually allows the next step that we're talking about today, which is integration. So, and this thing about love and hate, I love this, I hate that. But we wouldn't say that there's not still some feeling about that somewhere in the psyche. We wouldn't say that. But we would say that there's an inner resolve that it doesn't make any difference. And when there's an inner resolve that it doesn't make any difference, and we've actually found the capacity to live in the light of this resolve, it's not brutal, you're not being hard on yourself or anything else. It's not like that. It's just, okay, this is the way it is. And we accept, yeah, there's still likes and dislikes, but I learned a long time ago the likes and dislikes aren't what it's about here. that doing something just because I like it, it never works out right, and avoiding something because I don't like it, it never works out right. And so finally we get to, and then no peace from it, because I'll miss some responsibility, some duty that I should have engaged in, and the fact that I didn't do it, it'll pile up, knots come, all of this, and I wish to live a knot-free life. And so then, okay, like, dislike, it's fine. And there's, and this is what we deal with when we step into these next sutras. There's this capacity actually within us, all of us have it, to step back from the mind field, from all the stuff that's happening here. And the more this is controlled, the more we've taken control of it and established a reasonable order within it. And we understand the priorities, and we understand about duty and all of this. And that's intellect, of course, and that understanding becomes firm and we resolve to live it. Then this becomes more shadowy. It's not the primary anymore, and there's a capacity to stand back from it and not identify it. And the feeling might be there, but it's okay.
That's where meditation is a wonderful tool to step back.
Yes, it is. It is. It is. Oh. And that's where we come now. So 52 and 53. Dwelling in solitude, eating but little, with speech, body, and mind subdued, always engaged in meditation and concentration, taking refuge in dispassion. That's 52. Having abandoned egoism and a show of strength, arrogance, desire, anger, and covetousness, free from the notion of mine and peaceful, he is fit for becoming Brahman. So we'll explore this a bit now this morning. Now, in listening to this, just like everything else, at first we'll hear it our own way, based upon our own conditioning and our own notions. So I ask you to remember where they are when Lord Krishna is telling Arjuna this. Yeah, and remember that the hermitage, physical hermitage, is not what he's talking about. Couldn't be, right? You have to put it back in context. So, and Arjuna at the beginning would have loved to hear this from Lord Krishna, because then he would have he would have left the arrows on the ground. He would have gone off to the hermitage and he said, okay, whatever happens, happens. I'm going to sit here and meditate and contemplate all the time now. So that can't be the meaning of it. Recognize that can't be the meaning of what's being said. So, There's a lovely commentary here from Swami Venkatesananda. He says the 3 verses, 51 to 53, may indicate what we should do after establishing ourselves in the perfection mentioned earlier. They may also be construed to indicate the symptomology of perfection itself, what it looks like. Perfection and becoming Brahman being 2 sides of the same coin. And then he goes here. He says, the practice of seeing God in all and serving and loving all as the manifestation of the supreme reality, which was described in previous verses, is an essential preliminary and auxiliary to what is taught in these verses. The seeker who shuns the world will only drive it into his subconscious and revive it in solitude. His world hatred may appear to be a qualification for retiring into seclusion. If he is sincere, however, he will soon discover that isolation is a function of thought. It is not a feat. And therefore he has no control over himself, and his speech, body, and mind are not subdued but suppressed. So we can work a little bit with this, what he's sharing, to try to give us some insight to the perspective. This dwelling in solitude. So we can say eating but little, okay, that's physical, but eating but little is also related to all 5 senses, isn't it? You see? Eating but little.
What's that?
You remember you consume through all 5 senses. You eat through all 5 senses.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
No. Don't lose that.
Right.
In the scriptures, when we're relating to one sense, we're really relating to all 5. So, eating but little. With speech, body, and mind subdued, always engaged in meditation and concentration, taking refuge in dispassion. So dwelling in solitude then, Swamiji says it's a mental state, not a feat, not something that you've pulled yourself out physically into a place of solitude. What we observe here is and it develops with the resolve that we're talking about. It develops. What we observe is a capacity to engage in loving way, be fully engaged, but at the same time to be in the cave of the heart and undisturbed by anything that's happening. Both. Same time. You see, it's not that there are 2 here. It's not that there's duplicity, but there are levels. There's depth here. And there's surface level, which is where all of the activity is occurring. And there's the depth where there's no activity whatsoever. And truth be told, each of us are this. We look different at the surface level, but we're identical in the depth. Like each wave will look different a little bit. Each snowflake looks different. And so at the surface level, there's all of the activity, there's all of the passion, there's all of the engagement, there's the war going on, there's the birth and death. All of this is playing out. And this is the same point, by the way, the video that we watched with Ramdas teaching. It's really the same point. So all of this is happening. Arjuna is not Lord Krishna is not telling Arjuna, don't do your duty, right? On the contrary, he's saying, do it, and you have to get out there and really genuinely fight and do your absolute best. And he gives him the formula, and this is related to the formula of what does that look like on the inside, while people on the outside will say, this guy is a madman. Right? He sees the arrow coming at him from behind his head. He's amazing. You can imagine the most trumped up warrior from any movie you've ever seen, and that's what Arjuna is about to do. Any jujitsu or martial arts film that you've seen with Bruce Lee or any of this, you can picture, okay, that's Arjuna. That's about what he's to step out and do. Huh? And so our old way of looking at things is, oh my God, what's that inner state? The way we would relate to it is, well, everything's moving so fast, and he's thinking of this, and he's thinking of that, and he's doing this, and he's doing that. But by the time Arjuna steps out there, he recognizes, I'm not doing anything. And he's watching the show, just like us. So a question of depth. And Brahman, of course, is here, not somewhere else. This attaining to Brahman that Lord Krishna is talking about is right here, right now, and not somewhere else in some other time. It's not, I'll get around to it after the war. This is the Gita Yoga. This is the beauty of Gita Yoga. This is for living what we call the real life, but living it in a way that we find within us the kingdom. We don't have to run away to the kingdom. We can, as it were, run to it inside at the same time as the activity is occurring outside. And of course, the funniest thing about us, and we all have this experience, is the less involved we are with our own mental activity when we're engaged, the more perfect is the activity itself. Yes? We can sit in the stands and watch the guy making that end zone catch. If anybody enjoys football, that used to be a great thing for Swami. And we can imagine what's going through the mind, but if you bother to ask him, he says nothing. Nothing. I saw the ball and then it was in my hands. And so, sorry, please.
I was saying my physics teacher used to say, he says, Michael Jordan knows physics better than any of you.
Oh. Yes.
So can we say this space of solitude is because there's only one, so there's no other.
Yes,
That makes solitude.
Well, it is this understanding, but also the actual withdrawing into it. And that's where Ram Dass is talking about. You withdraw in enough not to forget, and you stay out enough to have the compassion and to act in the world from the place of compassion. And that's what we see is his talk is really related to this.
Right. Yeah.
So if we go out too far and we lose the center, then right. Yeah. So dwelling in solitude, eating but little, that applies really to all the senses, with speech, body, and mind subdued. Subdued could mean lethargic in some way of understanding, but of course that wouldn't work. So therefore, subdued here has to mean under your control. Or under my control, what Krishna would say more properly. Under the control of the gunas. Always engaged in meditation and concentration. And there we need to understand, okay, there's no time for siddhasana. It's not happening. Which mudra? This mudra. So it can't mean take your whole day and sit in meditation. And he's saying always in meditation. When I went to Vietnam, the last time I was in Vietnam, and went to the Shivananda Yoga ashram there in Dalat. There's a character there, very big character. She was head of finance, and really wonderful. And she wanted to take me to the Buddhist monastery, and the name's not coming right now, but there's a large Buddhist monastery there in Dalat. And so, great, we went. It's the second time I'd been there, and it's a wonderful place. And so we were there, we were sitting, we were watching the monks and such, and just in a lovely space. And she says that the time she had come before, they actually met a monk. She was with another Swami, and they met a monk and had some conversation. This time it didn't happen, but she told me the story. She said that the Swami that she was with asked the monk, "How often do you meditate?" And the monk looked like this sense of wonder. He said, "All of the time." All of the time. And of course, we remember that meditation is to bring the mind to a single point, and on what? On the deity. And where is the deity? There you go. And so seeing that and having the mind there is constant meditation. And of course, this is what Lord Krishna is talking about. The eyes open, eyes closed kind of meditation. And contemplation also, contemplation on the nature of truth, underlying, to actually see it. So he's talking about this inner space, and then having abandoned egoism, which is clearly something inside, not outside. Right? And he doesn't say, it's a funny thing, Swami Shivananda, the great master, will say, kill the ego. Lord Krishna isn't saying that, but he's actually discussing the way it could be killed, which is when you just abandon it. Again, it becomes as a shadow. Any of the tendencies within you when you actually abandon, a good example, of course, I look to Hara because he's very involved in 12-step and all of this, and one of the gifts that was given to him was this addiction and then coming through it. And he would never say, I'm not addicted, not in a limited sense, he wouldn't say that, because the tendency's still there. But he's abandoned it. Does that make sense? No, he's abandoned it. And as a result, it becomes more shadowy. Now, he still recognizes that it's there in the psyche. In the spirit, it's not there.
Right.
Yeah. So, same with egoism. We find, amazingly enough, in spite of all the evidence to the contrary, from here, it's possible to purify the intellect. It's possible to let go of that which doesn't serve. It's possible to experience a change in the intellect, in the way of seeing things. And it's possible even for an absolute understanding that I am not this body, I am not these thoughts, all of this is universal, all of that's possible. But still, sometimes the feeling of separation is seen. These days, not so much. These days, it doesn't seem to be around. Just observing. These days, it's not really around. These days, it's really not a feeling of being separate. But at some point, that feeling was abandoned. It was completely renounced because it was seen through. It was seen to be completely untrue. And, how is it that we can continue to live as if what's untrue is true? We live in a quandary, in a terrible place when we do. Again, the tendencies if we follow the tendencies, they might have us do that. So having abandoned egoism, a show of strength, arrogance, desire, anger, and covetousness, free from the notion of mine. Again, it's a feeling, it's an idea, it's a notion. But when investigated, the only thing that could possibly be mine is the ignorance. Ahamkara is the only thing that could possibly be mine. But then I recognize, but that's yours too. So the notion of mind, and peaceful, therefore peaceful, he's fit for becoming Brahman. Just a little, one last paragraph of Swamiji's commentary on these two slokas. He says, our master insisted that the spiritual seeker should intelligently combine a number of spiritual practices to prevent egoism arising. In all cases, one should be honest with oneself, never yielding to hypocrisy and showiness, the tendencies inside. All this may take a lifetime, but then the reward is well worth the effort. If yoga is made extremely unpleasant, the mind will revolt. If it's made too pleasant, it will be caught, and the middle path alone is good. We can, just as a practical matter along this point, I would never advise to extreme aesthetic nature. That was the Buddha, the whole Buddha thing. And sometimes we can hear this when we learn that an idea, a notion, or feeling is not serving, we're going to let it go. And that could sound like I'm going to kill it on the spot. But it doesn't happen that way. Letting it go, and then there's a whole inner dialogue about letting things go, because the tendencies will still arise. So just as a practical approach here, recognizing that we're talking about yoga, we're talking about having resolve, having firmness, but we're not talking about being cruel. We're really talking about finding an approach within ourselves that allows us as quickly as we possibly can to let go of all that's not serving. And really having the resolve to see, I can't do that. It won't be helpful. But then the capacity to deal with that inside, which is going to take love. Love is the power of correction. And the great power of correction, the ability to correct it, has to be love. Anger will never do it. So when we get into these places and we think that, this is the most terrible thing, and we're being told to be harsh on ourselves and angry on ourselves, that I don't see it that way at all. You see, we're talking about love. Real love. Where we tune into the capacity to be firm with ourselves, but in an uplifted way. In a way that helps us to remember what's the goal. And helps us to see ourselves in the light of love, not in anger, hatred, Judgment. Judgment, discernment. Yeah. Oh. Okay. Questions or comments? Anything we'd like to discuss about the shlokas today? Shivaya, good morning. Good morning, Dao. How's Dao? Yay! Hari, please check and see if we have any notes or questions from our online Sangha, and then we can close.
Just good morning, thank you.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right, let's close with final prayers in Arati, page 174. Oh, I just want to say this, that the significance of these shlokas that we're dealing with today, Krishna actually uses the words become Brahman. In a way we can say become what we already are, but it's so significant in this way, from a practical standpoint. Everything we've always wanted has always been inside. And so what's being described is not a self-denial, it's a self-affirmation. And the way to get there. Yeah. Just for this. Oh. Okay. Om Trayambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushti Vardhanam Orvai Rukmeva Bandhanan Mritor Mokshiyama Mritat Om Trayambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushti Vardhanam Orvai Rukmeva Bandhanan Mritor Mokshiyama Mritat Om Trayambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushti Vardhanam Orvai Rukmeva Bandhanan Mritor Mokshiyama Mritat Om Sarvesham Swastir Bhavatu Sarvesham Shantir Bhavatu Sarvesham Purnam Bhavatu Sarvesham Mangalam Bhavatu Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha Sarve Shantu Niramaya Sarve Bhadrani Pashanto Makashit Dukhabhak Bhave Asato Ma Satgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotir Gamaya Mritor Ma Mritam Gamaya Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnamudashate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vasishate Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. O adorable Lord of mercy and love, salutations and prostrations unto Thee. Thou art omnipresent, omnipotent, and omniscient. Thou art Satchidananda. Thou art existence, knowledge, and bliss absolute. Thou art the indweller of all beings. Grant us an understanding heart, equal vision, balanced mind, faith, devotion, and wisdom. Grant us inner spiritual strength to resist temptation and to control the mind. Free us from egoism, lust, anger, greed, hatred, and jealousy. Fill our hearts with divine virtues. Let us behold Thee in all these names and forms. Let us serve Thee in all these names and forms. Let us ever remember Thee. Let us ever sing Thy glories. Let Thy name be ever on our lips. Let us abide in Thee forever and ever. On below Satguru Shivananda Maharaj Ki, and for all the saints and sages of all the traditions. Let's rise for our tea.